What if the biggest reason you're stuck in life isn't the world, your luck, or your circumstances, but you? In the mountain is you. You'll discover a shocking truth that most of us are unknowingly sabotaging our own success, happiness, and growth every single day. If you've ever felt trapped in the same patterns, struggling to stay consistent, or wondering why you can't reach your full potential, then this video is exactly for you. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, you will learn how to identify your self-sabotaging habits, break free from them, and finally start transforming your life from the inside out. Most people believe their biggest obstacles in life are external: lack of money, bad luck, difficult people. But this book flips that belief entirely. It argues that the real mountain standing in your way is internal. Your own patterns of self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is not random or meaningless. It is a coping mechanism, a way your mind tries to protect you from discomfort, failure, or even success. For example, imagine someone who dreams of starting a business but keeps procrastinating. On the surface, it looks like laziness, but underneath, there may be a deep fear of failure or rejection. So instead of moving forward, they stay stuck, convincing themselves they are not ready yet. The book explains that until you understand these hidden emotional drivers, you will continue repeating the same cycles no matter how motivated you feel at the beginning. A powerful idea presented is that your habits are not the problem. They are the result of unresolved emotions and unmet needs. For instance, someone who constantly seeks validation on social media might actually be trying to fill a deeper void of self-worth. Similarly, a person who quits halfway through every goal may not lack discipline, but instead fears what will happen if they actually succeed and their life changes. The author emphasizes that true transformation does not come from forcing productivity or copying routines, but from understanding yourself on a deeper level. This means sitting with uncomfortable emotions, questioning your beliefs, and identifying the stories you keep telling yourself. Ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I succeed? Or what benefit am I getting from staying the same? These questions may feel uncomfortable, but they reveal the hidden logic behind your behavior. The book also highlights that change requires emotional intelligence and self-awareness. Instead of fighting yourself, you learn to work with yourself. For example, if you notice you always procrastinate when a task feels overwhelming, instead of judging yourself, you break the task into smaller, manageable steps. If you tend to overthink decisions, you create simple rules to reduce mental clutter. These small shifts build trust within yourself. Over time, this trust becomes a foundation for discipline and consistency. Think of it like climbing a mountain. You don't jump to the top in one move. You take steady, intentional steps, even when it feels slow. Ultimately, the message of the book is empowering. You are not broken, and you are not your bad habits. You are someone who has learned certain patterns, and that means you can unlearn them too. The mountain is not there to stop you. It is there to show you what you need to heal, understand, and overcome. When you begin to face your fears instead of avoiding them, and when you replace self-judgment with self-awareness, you stop being your own obstacle and start becoming your own solution. Main point: self-sabotage is not laziness. It is a protective response driven by fear and unresolved emotions. Your habits reflect deeper emotional needs, not just a lack of discipline. Real change starts with self-awareness, not forcing productivity. Ask reflective questions like, what am I afraid of if I succeed? What comfort am I getting from staying the same? Break overwhelming tasks into smaller steps to build consistency. Replace self-judgment with understanding to create lasting change. You can unlearn destructive patterns because they were learned, not permanent. Self-sabotage often feels mysterious and frustrating, as if we are working against our own goals and desires. But the truth is that our minds have a very clear, albeit hidden, logic behind it. The book explains that self-sabotage is a coping mechanism. It's how our brain tries to protect us from perceived threats, discomfort, or failure, even when those threats are imagined. For example, imagine someone who dreams of writing a book but keeps finding excuses to avoid it. On the surface, it looks like laziness or procrastination. But underneath, there may be a fear of judgment, criticism, or even the responsibility that success could bring. Another example is someone who repeatedly enters unhealthy relationships despite wanting love and stability. They may unconsciously recreate familiar patterns because their mind equates familiarity with safety, even if it leads to pain. This chapter highlights that self-sabotage often comes from deep-seated emotional patterns, unresolved trauma, and internal conflicts between desire and fear. The book also points out that self-sabotage is not about weakness or lack of willpower. It is a form of misguided self-preservation. Understanding why we self-sabotage means asking reflective questions that cut through the surface excuses. What am I trying to avoid by staying in this comfort zone? What fear am I protecting myself from? For instance, if you delay starting a new project, ask yourself whether you fear failure, embarrassment, or the change success might bring. By identifying the underlying fear or unmet emotional need, you can respond consciously instead of reacting unconsciously. Real-life applications include setting small, achievable goals to gradually overcome fear, journaling to uncover recurring patterns, or consciously replacing avoidance behaviors with constructive habits. The chapter emphasizes that self-sabotage is essentially a signal, an internal alert that points to the areas where we need to heal, grow, or confront difficult truths about ourselves. The key takeaway is that when we understand the why behind our self-sabotage, we gain the power to transform it. We stop blaming ourselves for being lazy, broken, or incapable, and start seeing patterns as opportunity for growth. For instance, someone who repeatedly procrastinates on career goals might discover that they actually fear losing a safety net or disappointing others. Once they acknowledge this fear, they can create strategies to move forward despite it, such as breaking tasks into smaller steps, seeking mentorship, or practicing self-compassion during setbacks. By turning self-sabotage into self-awareness, the mountain we face is no longer a barrier, but a roadmap to our own growth and mastery. Main point self-sabotage is a coping mechanism, not a weakness that IT often stems from fear, unresolved trauma, or internal conflict between desire and safety. Reflective questions to uncover hidden motives. What am I avoiding by staying in this pattern? What fear is controlling my behavior? How does this pattern serve me? Recognize patterns in procrastination, relationships, and habits as signals, not failures. Apply solutions like breaking tasks into smaller steps, journaling, or replacing avoidance. With constructive habits, self-sabotage can be transformed into self-awareness and personal growth once understood. Confronting fears consciously empowers action and builds long-term self-mastery. Self-sabotage is often misunderstood as mere laziness, lack of willpower, or personal failure, but the reality is far more nuanced. The book explains that self-sabotage is a subconscious mechanism, an internal defense system that kicks in when our mind perceives risk, discomfort, or potential change as threatening. Think of it like a smoke detector going off even when there's no fire. For example, imagine someone who has been offered a promotion at work but keeps delaying the acceptance or making excuses. On the surface, it may look like procrastination or fear of responsibility, but deeper down, the person might fear judgment from peers, or feel unworthy of success, or even worry about losing relationships or routines that have defined their comfort zone. Another scenario could be someone attempting to adopt healthier habits, like going to the gym regularly, but repeatedly finds reasons to skip. The real issue is not discipline. It's the emotional resistance that stems from an unconscious belief that change is dangerous, uncomfortable, or unfamiliar. The chapter highlights that self-sabotage often manifests in cycles, where we engage in behaviors that seem irrational or counterproductive because they fulfill a hidden need. For instance, someone might stay in toxic relationships repeatedly because familiarity feels safer than facing the uncertainty of being alone. Or someone might binge-watch television late into the night instead of preparing for a career opportunity because the comfort temporarily shields them from confronting deeper anxieties about failure or inadequacy. By understanding self-sabotage in this way, the book reframes it as a message, a signal from your mind indicating areas of unresolved emotions, fear, or self-doubt. This reframing encourages reflection. Instead of punishing yourself for procrastinating or making poor choices, you start asking questions like, what am I avoiding by doing this? Or what is the fear behind my resistance to change? The book provides actionable ways to respond to self-sabotage. One approach is to map out recurring patterns in your behavior and identify the triggers behind them. For example, if you notice you always avoid tasks that involve public speaking, examine what emotions arise in those moments. Is it embarrassment, fear of judgment, or fear of failure? Once identified, you can take small, incremental steps to rewire your responses, such as practicing in low-pressure settings, reframing mistakes as learning opportunities, or using positive affirmations to build internal confidence. Self-sabotage is not a flaw. It's an opportunity to gain self-awareness, cultivate emotional intelligence, and learn how to work with your inner mind rather than against it. The more we explore the hidden why behind our behaviors, the better we can align our actions with our true goals and desires. Main point: self-sabotage is not laziness or weakness. It's a subconscious defense mechanism that arises when change, growth, or success triggers fear or discomfort. Reflective questions uncover self-sabotaging patterns. What am I avoiding by staying in this habit? What emotions arise when I consider change or success? How does this behavior protect me, even if it harms me in the long run? Recognize recurring patterns in procrastination, relationships, or lifestyle choices as signals, not failures. Apply actionable steps, map patterns and triggers in your behavior. Take incremental, low-pressure actions toward goals. Use reframing, journaling, or positive affirmations to challenge limiting beliefs. Self-sabotage is a guide. By understanding it, you can transform it into self-awareness and personal growth. Aligning actions with conscious choices helps break destructive cycles and build consistent progress. Many people believe they self-sabotage randomly or because they lack motivation, but the truth is that every act of self-sabotage has a hidden purpose, even if it's harmful in the long run. This chapter dives into the question: why do we consistently make choices that undermine our own goals, happiness, or growth? The book explains that self-sabotage is often an unconscious attempt to maintain a sense of control, avoid discomfort, or protect the ego from potential failure. For instance, imagine a person who repeatedly procrastinates on applying for a dream job. On the surface, it might look like laziness or indecision. However, beneath that avoidance could lie the fear of rejection, the fear of leaving a familiar routine, or even the fear of success, because succeeding might force them to take on responsibilities they feel unprepared for. Similarly, someone might repeatedly sabotage romantic relationships, not because they dislike love, but because their mind equates closeness with vulnerability, and vulnerability feels unsafe. The book emphasizes that understanding why you do it requires looking beyond actions to the underlying emotional drivers. For example, someone who continually indulges in unhealthy habits, like excessive shopping, overeating, or binge-watching TV, might be trying to numb anxiety, fill a void, or distract themselves from confronting difficult emotions. By identifying these root motives, we shift from self-blame to self-awareness. Reflective questions can help uncover these hidden truths. What am I trying to protect myself from by acting this way? What emotion am I avoiding? Or how does this pattern serve me, even if it seems destructive? Applying these insights in daily life could include journaling about triggers, consciously pausing before making choices that feel automatic, or practicing small, intentional acts of courage that gradually rewire fear-based habits. Ultimately, the chapter teaches that self-sabotage is not evidence of weakness. It is a signal that your inner world needs attention and care. Once you understand why you do it, you can transform your behavior by addressing the underlying emotions instead of fighting the surface-level actions. For example, someone who avoids social opportunities might start by acknowledging their fear of judgment and gradually exposing themselves to small social interactions. Over time, the conscious understanding of motives allows you to replace automatic self-sabotaging behaviors with deliberate choices that align with your goals, creating real and sustainable change. Main point: self-sabotage always has a hidden purpose: control, safety, or ego protection. Common drivers include fear of failure, fear of success, avoidance of discomfort, and emotional pain. Reflective questions uncover motives. What am I trying to protect myself from by acting this way? What emotion am I avoiding? How does this pattern serve me, even if it seems harmful? Look beyond the behavior to understand the emotional driver behind it. Practical applications: journaling about triggers and patterns, pausing before automatic behaviors, gradually exposing yourself to feared situations to build confidence. Self-sabotage is a signal, not a flaw. Understanding it allows intentional change. Aligning conscious actions with personal goals replaces destructive cycles with sustainable growth. Every time we feel stuck, frustrated, or sabotaged, it's rarely random. It is often triggered by specific emotional patterns we have developed over time. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest explains that understanding your triggers is a key to breaking cycles of self-sabotage. Triggers are emotional sparks, moments, situations, or interactions that activate old fears, insecurities, or limiting beliefs. For example, imagine someone who consistently loses confidence when their boss critiques their work. The critique might feel minor to an outsider, but for them, it triggers deep-seated feelings of inadequacy rooted in childhood experiences where approval was conditional. Another scenario is someone who overeats whenever they feel stressed or lonely. The act of eating becomes an emotional coping mechanism, a way to temporarily soothe discomfort rather than address the underlying feeling. By identifying these patterns, we start to see that our automatic reactions are often learned responses, not inherent flaws. The book emphasizes that recognizing emotional patterns is not about self-judgment, it's about awareness. One practical method is journaling, writing down situations that provoke strong emotional reactions, noting the thoughts, physical sensations, and behaviors that follow. Over time, patterns emerge, revealing what truly drives your self-sabotaging actions. Reflective questions like, what am I really feeling in this moment? Or which past experience does this reaction remind me of? Help you uncover the root causes. Once triggers are understood, you can consciously choose how to respond instead of reacting automatically. For example, if a work critique triggers anxiety, instead of spiraling into self-doubt, you could take a pause, reframe the critique as an opportunity to improve, and respond constructively. Similarly, if stress prompts overeating, you could replace the pattern with a healthier coping mechanism, such as taking a short walk, practicing breathing exercises, or talking to a friend. Recognizing and managing your triggers empowers you to break old cycles and create consistent, conscious behavior that aligns with your true goals. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that your triggers and emotional patterns are not obstacles. They are guideposts pointing to areas that need awareness, healing, and intentional action. By facing these patterns instead of avoiding them, you transform emotional reactivity into emotional intelligence, paving the way for lasting change and personal growth. Main points triggers are emotional sparks that activate old fears, insecurities, or limiting beliefs that self-sabotaging behaviors often arise from automatic emotional patterns learned over time. Reflective questions to uncover triggers. What am I really feeling in this moment? Which past experience does this reaction remind me of? How does this trigger influence my actions? Practical steps. Journal emotional reactions and patterns. Pause before reacting to triggers. Reframe negative experiences as opportunities to grow. Replace harmful coping mechanisms with healthier alternatives. Awareness of triggers allows conscious choice instead of automatic reaction. Managing emotional patterns builds emotional intelligence and supports personal growth. Understanding triggers is a first step toward breaking cycles of self-sabotage and aligning behavior with goals. Comfort zones are often misunderstood as safe havens, but in reality, they can be the invisible chains that keep us from reaching our true potential. This chapter explains that comfort zones are psychological spaces where we feel familiar, secure, and in control, but staying within them often means avoiding growth, challenge, and the unknown. For example, consider someone who dreams of starting a business but remains in a stable, unfulfilling job because the security of a paycheck feels safer than risking failure. Or imagine a person who desires deep relationships but avoids vulnerability because confronting emotional intimacy feels uncomfortable. While these behaviors may provide short-term relief or security, over time, they reinforce stagnation, self-doubt, and even self-sabotage. The book emphasizes that growth is rarely found in comfort. It is found in facing fear, taking calculated risks, and embracing the discomfort that comes with change. The chapter also points out that the mind often tricks us into staying in comfort zones through rationalizations. I'll do it later. I'm not ready yet. Or what if I fail? These statements may feel reasonable, but they mask fear and resistance. For instance, someone might repeatedly delay applying to a dream college because they fear not being accepted, using "I need more preparation" as a justification. Another person might avoid having a difficult conversation in a relationship, preferring temporary peace over honest expression. Recognizing these mental patterns is key. Reflective questions like, what am I avoiding by staying here? Or how would my life change if I step beyond this comfort zone? Can illuminate the ways our comfort zones limit us. Practical applications include taking incremental steps toward discomfort rather than attempting complete overhaul. For example, if public speaking terrifies you, start by practicing in front of a trusted friend, then gradually increase your audience. If you fear leaving a safe job to pursue a passion project, start dedicating small blocks of time to your project while maintaining stability. These small, Intentional acts of courage train your mind to tolerate discomfort, gradually expanding your capacity for growth. The chapter teaches that comfort zones are not inherently bad, but they become harmful when they prevent you from evolving. By intentionally stepping beyond them, you confront the internal mountains that hold you back, ultimately unlocking resilience, confidence, and self-mastery. Main points: comfort zones provide temporary security but often block growth and potential. Self-sabotage often stems from fear disguised as comfort or rationalization. Reflective questions to uncover limitations. What am I avoiding by staying here? How would my life change if I step beyond this zone? What fears are keeping me trapped? Recognize rationalizations like "I'm not ready" or "I need more time" as fear in disguise. Practical steps to expand comfort zones. Take incremental, manageable steps toward discomfort. Gradually expose yourself to feared situations to build resilience. Practice reflection and self-awareness to identify when fear is guiding decisions. Stepping beyond comfort zones develops courage, confidence, and personal growth. Comfort zones become tools for mastery when consciously challenged rather than avoided. The desire to control everything in our lives is often disguised as discipline, responsibility, or organization. But in truth, it can be one of the most limiting forms of self-sabotage. This chapter explains that the need for control emerges from fear of uncertainty, fear of failure, or fear of disappointment. And it often leads to behaviors that paradoxically create more stress and stagnation. For instance, consider someone who micromanages every detail of a work project, believing that unless they control every step, it will fail. While their intentions are good, this behavior can lead to burnout, strained relationships with colleagues, and a lack of creative problem-solving because they are unwilling to trust others or allow space for uncertainty. Another example is a person who avoids taking risks in their personal life, such as moving to a new city or starting a new relationship, because they feel they cannot control the outcomes. In both cases, the need for control keeps them tethered to fear, preventing growth, learning, and meaningful progress. The book emphasizes that control is often an illusion. We cannot control outcomes, other people, or even all circumstances, but we can control our responses, choices, and mindset. Reflective questions such as, which parts of my life am I obsessively trying to control, and what would happen if I allowed uncertainty or failure, help uncover the ways control manifests as self-sabotage. Practical applications include identifying areas where control is unnecessary or unproductive, and practicing intentional letting go. For example, someone who constantly checks their work emails after hours could set boundaries to trust their team, freeing mental space and reducing anxiety. A person anxious about the future might focus on what they can influence today, like skill building, planning, or self-care, while accepting that not all outcomes are in their hands. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that the need for control is rooted in fear, and freedom comes from understanding what we can realistically influence and consciously releasing what we cannot. By shifting focus from controlling outcomes to mastering responses, we transform fear-driven behaviors into conscious, empowered choices. This allows for creativity, resilience, and genuine growth, showing that the mountain is not an external obstacle but an internal challenge we can overcome when we stop trying to control everything. Main points: the need for control is often a form of self-sabotage driven by fear of uncertainty, failure, or disappointment. Excessive control leads to stress, burnout, and stagnation. Despite good intentions, reflective questions to uncover control patterns. Which parts of my life am I obsessively trying to control? What would happen if I allowed uncertainty or failure? How is my need for control limiting growth or creativity? Practical steps to manage the need for control. Focus on what you can influence, not outcomes beyond your control. Set boundaries and delegate tasks when possible. Practice letting go of perfectionism and accepting uncertainty. Use mindfulness or journaling to track fear-driven control behaviors. Freedom and growth come from mastering responses rather than trying to control everything. Shifting focus from outcomes to conscious choices allows creativity, resilience, and empowered decision-making. Fear of change is one of the most powerful forces that keeps us stuck in patterns of self-sabotage. This chapter explains that humans are wired to seek familiarity because the brain equates the unknown with danger, even when staying the same harms us in the long run. For example, imagine someone who has the opportunity to move to a new city for a better job, but avoids it because leaving their current environment feels too risky. On the surface, it looks like indecision, but underneath, there's fear of the unfamiliar, fear of failure, fear of being judged, or fear of losing relationships and routines. Another example is someone who dreams of starting a healthier lifestyle but repeatedly delays action because it requires disrupting long-held habits like staying up late, skipping meals, or avoiding exercise. The discomfort of change triggers resistance, making the familiar, even if unhealthy or unfulfilling, feel safer than taking steps toward growth. The book highlights that fear of change is not a flaw. It is a signal pointing to where we need courage and conscious effort. Reflective questions such as, what am I avoiding by staying the same? Or how is fear influencing my decisions? Can help reveal the subconscious patterns that hold us back. Practical applications involve breaking change into small, manageable steps rather than attempting an immediate overhaul. For instance, if someone wants to change careers, they could start by taking a part-time course, networking, or exploring freelance opportunities, gradually building confidence and reducing fear. Similarly, if someone wants to adopt a healthier lifestyle, they could start by modifying one habit at a time, such as drinking more water, walking daily, or reducing sugar intake. Over time, these small steps diminish fear, rewire emotional patterns, and make the unfamiliar feel achievable. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that change is a necessary part of growth, and resisting it often results in prolonged stagnation, regret, and self-sabotage. By acknowledging fear and acting despite it, we reclaim control of our lives and transform fear into a tool for self-mastery. The mountain is not the external challenge. It is the internal resistance that we overcome by embracing change consciously and courageously. Main points: fear of change is a natural response but often keeps us stuck in harmful patterns. The brain equates the unfamiliar with danger, even when staying the same is detrimental. Reflective questions to uncover fear of change. What am I avoiding by staying the same? How is fear influencing my choices? What opportunities am I missing due to resistance? Practical steps to overcome fear change. Break big changes into small, manageable steps. Gradually expose yourself to new experiences to reduce fear. Use journaling or reflection to track emotional resistance and triggers. Reframe discomfort as a sign of growth rather than danger. Acting despite fear builds courage, confidence, and self-mastery. Change is essential for growth, resisting a prolonged stagnation and self-sabotage. Emotional blocks and trauma are often invisible forces shaping our decisions, habits, and self-sabotaging behaviors. This chapter explains that past experiences, especially unresolved trauma, can create mental and emotional barriers that prevent growth, even when we consciously desire change. For example, consider someone who repeatedly avoids close relationships because they experienced betrayal or abandonment in the past. The fear of being hurt again manifests as self-sabotage, pushing others away or choosing partners who are emotionally unavailable. Another scenario might involve someone who dreams of financial independence but struggles to save money or take risks because early experiences with scarcity or criticism instill the belief that they will never have enough. In both cases, past trauma silently dictates present behaviors, keeping the person trapped in cycles of fear, resistance, or avoidance. The book emphasizes that emotional blocks are not signs of weakness. They are protective mechanisms developed in response to pain. By identifying these blocks, we can begin to work through them instead of letting them unconsciously control our lives. Reflective questions such as, which past experiences are influencing my decisions today? And what emotions am I avoiding by repeating this pattern? Help uncover the roots of self-sabotage. Practical applications include therapy, journaling, meditation, or guided self-reflection to safely confront and process past trauma. For instance, someone who struggles with procrastination due to fear of criticism might journal about past experiences with judgment, identify the underlying beliefs, and gradually practice taking small actions despite fear. Similarly, if someone feels stuck in unhealthy relationships, exploring past emotional wounds can reveal patterns, enabling them to set boundaries and make healthier choices. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that confronting emotional blocks and trauma is essential for personal transformation. By acknowledging and processing past wounds, we can release limiting beliefs, break cycles of self-sabotage, and reclaim control of our actions and choices. The mountain is not the external challenge. It is the inner resistance rooted in unprocessed emotions and experiences. Facing these challenges head-on allows for healing, growth, and the freedom to live intentionally rather than reactively. Main points: emotional blocks and trauma silently shape behaviors and self-sabotage. Past experiences, especially unresolved trauma, create mental and emotional barriers to growth. Reflective questions to uncover emotional blocks. Which past experiences are influencing my decisions today? What emotions am I avoiding by repeating this pattern? How does this emotional block protect me, even if it limits me? Practical steps to work through emotional blocks. Journaling about triggers and past experiences. Meditation or mindfulness to observe emotional reactions without judgment. Therapy or guided self-reflection to process unresolved trauma. Take small, intentional actions that challenge limiting beliefs. Emotional blocks are protective mechanisms, not weaknesses. Addressing trauma allows you to break cycles of self-sabotage and reclaim agency. Healing and conscious awareness turn inner resistance into a tool for growth and empowerment. Limiting beliefs are invisible barriers that shape the way we see ourselves and the world, often keeping us from reaching our true potential. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest explains that these beliefs are mental constructs formed through past experiences, social conditioning, or repeated patterns of thought, and they often operate without conscious awareness. For example, someone might believe, "I'm not good enough to succeed," because they were criticized frequently as a child, or money is hard to come by due to growing up in a financially unstable environment. These beliefs then subtly influence decisions, behavior, and opportunities, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, avoidance of challenges, fear of failure, or settling for less than one deserves. A relatable scenario could be a talented artist who avoids sharing their work publicly, convinced that their creations won't be appreciated, even though friends and peers might find them inspiring. Similarly, a professional might avoid asking for promotion, anchored by a belief that they don't deserve advancement, even when their performance clearly warrants it. The book emphasizes that limiting beliefs are not facts. They are interpretations shaped by past experiences, often outdated or inaccurate. Recognizing them is a first step toward transformation. Reflective questions like, which beliefs are holding me back? Are these beliefs based on my current reality or past experiences? And what evidence do I have that contradicts these beliefs? Can help uncover mental patterns that fuel self-sabotage. Practical applications include writing down recurring negative thoughts, challenging them with evidence, and consciously replacing them with empowering affirmations or behaviors. For instance, if you believe, "I can't speak confidently in public," start by practicing in small groups, gradually expanding your comfort zone while reinforcing the belief that you can improve through practice. Another approach is reframing beliefs. Instead of "I'll never be successful," try "I am capable of learning and growing every day to achieve success." Over time, consistently challenging and replacing limiting beliefs rewires the mind, fostering resilience, confidence, and intentional action. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that the mountains we face are often created by our own minds. By identifying and transforming limiting beliefs, we break cycles of self-sabotage, reclaim personal power, and unlock the potential to live authentically and intentionally. The journey is not just about removing obstacles, it's about reshaping the very foundation of how we perceive ourselves and the world. Main points: limiting beliefs are mental constructs that restrict potential and influence behavior. They are formed through past experiences, social conditioning, or repeated negative patterns. Reflective questions to uncover limiting beliefs. Which beliefs are holding me back? Are these beliefs based on current reality or past experiences? What evidence contradicts these beliefs? Practical steps to overcome limiting beliefs. Write down recurring negative thoughts and challenge them with evidence. Replace disempowering beliefs with empowering affirmations and actions. Gradually practice skills or behaviors that contradict limiting beliefs. Reframe negative statements into growth-oriented perspectives. Limiting beliefs create self-fulfilling cycles of fear, avoidance, and stagnation. Transforming limiting beliefs fosters confidence, resilience, and intentional living. Breaking these mental barriers is essential to reclaiming personal power and unlocking potential. Awareness and self-reflection are the cornerstones of personal transformation, yet many people underestimate their power in breaking cycles of self-sabotage. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest emphasizes that the first step toward meaningful change is observing yourself, your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and patterns without judgment. For example, imagine someone who repeatedly procrastinates at work. Without awareness, they might blame external factors like, "I don't have enough time," or "the task is too hard," never realizing that fear of failure or perfectionism is driving their inaction. By practicing self-reflection, they can uncover the root cause of their procrastination and make intentional choices instead of reacting unconsciously. Another scenario could involve interpersonal relationships. A person may notice they always clash with a certain colleague or friend. Reflective self-awareness helps them ask, am I projecting my insecurities onto this situation? Is my reaction based on past experiences rather than present reality? This insight allows for constructive communication and healthier interactions. The book highlights that self-awareness is not passive. It is an active, ongoing practice that involves asking hard questions and being honest with yourself. Reflective questions like, why do I react this way? What patterns do I repeat in my relationships, work, or habits? And which emotions am I avoiding or suppressing? Help bring unconscious behaviors into conscious awareness. Practical applications include journaling, mindfulness, and periodic self-check INS to monitor emotional and behavioral patterns. For instance, someone trying to improve their health might keep a journal of cravings, moods, and triggers, uncovering emotional eating patterns that were previously invisible. Another application is using reflection to course-correct after setbacks instead of blaming external circumstances. One can ask, what part did I play in this outcome? And what can I do differently next time? Over time, these practices develop emotional intelligence, clarity, and self-mastery, enabling conscious decision-making that aligns with personal goals. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that awareness and self-reflection transform reactive living into intentional living. By observing ourselves without judgment, uncovering the hidden drivers of our behavior, and acting consciously, we dismantle self-sabotage and reclaim agency over our choices. The mountain is not an external obstacle. It is the inner terrain of unexamined thoughts, emotions, and habits. Conquering it begins with a simple yet profound practice of looking inward. Main points awareness and self-reflection are essential for identifying and breaking patterns of self-sabotage. Observing thoughts, emotions, and behaviors without judgment uncovers hidden drivers of actions. Reflective questions promote self-awareness. Why do I react this way? What patterns do I repeat in my life? Which emotions am I avoiding or suppressing? Practical steps to apply awareness and reflection. Keep a journal to track thoughts, emotions, and triggers. Use mindfulness techniques to observe reactions in real time. Perform periodic self-check INS to assess progress and adjust behaviors. Reflect on setbacks to identify lessons and actionable changes. Self-awareness transforms reactive living into intentional living. Developing awareness builds emotional intelligence, clarity, and conscious decision-making. Looking inward is a first step to overcoming internal mountains and reclaiming personal power. Building emotional intelligence is a critical step in transforming self-sabotaging behaviors into empowered choices. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest explains that emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, while also empathizing with and navigating the emotions of others. Without this skill, we often react impulsively or unconsciously, which perpetuates cycles of self-sabotage. For example, imagine a manager who receives criticism at work and immediately lashes out at their team. A lack of emotional intelligence prevents them from pausing to process feelings, recognize triggers, or respond constructively. Conversely, a person with high emotional intelligence might acknowledge their initial anger, analyze the feedback objectively, and respond thoughtfully, turning a potentially destructive situation into a growth opportunity. Similarly, in personal relationships, someone who notices that jealousy or insecurity drives repeated conflicts can learn to pause, reflect, and communicate needs effectively rather than acting out destructively. The chapter highlights that building emotional intelligence involves self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and social skills. Reflective questions like, what emotions am I experiencing right now and why? How do my emotions influence my actions? And how might someone else perceive the situation differently? Guide the development of these skills. Practical applications include daily journaling of emotions, pausing before reacting in high-stress situations, and consciously practicing empathy. For instance, if someone finds themselves frustrated with a friend or partner, they can take a moment to ask, what might they be feeling? What's influencing their behavior? Instead of reacting defensively. Another application is developing self-regulation techniques such as deep breathing, mindfulness, or reframing negative thoughts, which allows individuals to respond rather than react. Over time, cultivating emotional intelligence enables better decision-making, stronger relationships, and resilience in the face of challenges, ultimately turning emotional awareness into personal power. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that emotional intelligence is not an innate trait, but a skill that can be strengthened through awareness, practice, and reflection. By understanding and managing our emotions, we dismantle self-sabotage, improve relationships, and navigate life's challenges with clarity, empathy, and confidence. The mountain we face is not outside. It exists in the unchecked emotional patterns within us, and building emotional intelligence equips us to climb it effectively. Main points emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your emotions while empathizing with others. Lack of emotional intelligence perpetuates self-sabotage through reactive behavior. Reflective questions to enhance emotional intelligence. What emotions am I experiencing and why? How do my emotions influence my actions? How might someone else perceive the situation differently? Practical steps to build emotional intelligence. Daily journaling of emotions and triggers. Pausing before reacting in stressful situations. Practicing empathy by considering others' perspectives. Using self-regulation techniques like deep breathing, mindfulness, and reframing negative thoughts. Emotional intelligence improves decision-making, relationships, and resilience. Developing emotional intelligence transforms reactive patterns into conscious, empowered choices. The mountain of personal growth is climbed more effectively with awareness and management of emotions. Releasing the past is one of the most transformative steps in overcoming self-sabotage and stepping into a life of purpose and empowerment. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest explains that clinging to old experiences, resentments, or regrets creates emotional weight that limits growth, clouds judgment, and prevents us from fully embracing present. For example, imagine someone who experienced betrayal in a past relationship. They may unconsciously sabotage future relationships, fearing vulnerability, even with a partner who is trustworthy and supportive. Similarly, a person who experienced failure in a career endeavor might avoid pursuing new opportunities, convinced that history will repeat itself, even though circumstances and skills have changed. By holding on to these past experiences, we allow old narratives to dictate our choices, keeping us trapped in cycles of fear, self-doubt, and inaction. The book emphasizes that releasing the past does not mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It means acknowledging the experience, learning from it, and consciously choosing not to let it control present decisions. Reflective questions like, which parts of my past am I still carrying that no longer serve me? How have old fears shaped my current decisions? And what lessons can I extract and apply moving forward? Help identify lingering emotional baggage. Practical applications include journaling about past events with the intention of reframing them, expressing unresolved emotions through conversations or therapy, and practicing forgiveness, not for the sake of others, but to free oneself. For instance, someone struggling with workplace resentment might write down the events, identify what they learned about boundaries and communication, and choose to approach future interactions with clarity and confidence. Another example could involve a person who regrets a failed business venture. They could analyze what went wrong, extract actionable insights, and use that knowledge to approach future projects with greater wisdom and resilience. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that the mountain we face is often built from unprocessed experiences and emotional baggage. Releasing the past allows us to lighten our internal load, make decisions with clarity, and take purposeful steps toward growth. By letting go, we reclaim agency over our present and future, transforming past pain into insight, resilience, and empowerment. The process of release is not instant. It requires patience, reflection, and conscious practice, but it is essential for self-mastery and personal evolution. Main points: holding on to the past creates emotional weight, self-doubt, and cycles of fear. Releasing the past does not mean forgetting. It means learning and consciously choosing freedom from old narratives. Reflective questions to release the past. Which parts of my past am I still carrying that no longer serve me? How have old fears shaped my current decisions? What lessons can I extract and apply moving forward? Practical steps to release the past. Journal and reframe past experiences to extract insights. Express unresolved emotions through conversation, therapy, or reflection. Practice forgiveness for your own freedom, not necessarily for others. Apply lessons learned from past failures to make better future decisions. Releasing the past lightens internal burdens and enhances clarity in decision-making. Letting go transforms old pain into resilience, wisdom, and empowerment. Conscious release of the past is essential to overcoming self-sabotage and climbing your internal mountain. Rewriting your story is a powerful step in reclaiming control over your life and breaking free from self-sabotage. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest explains that the narratives we tell ourselves about who we are, what we deserve, and what is possible shape our beliefs, emotions, and actions. Often, these stories are shaped by past experiences, trauma, or limiting beliefs, and they quietly dictate our choices and behaviors. For example, imagine someone who grew up hearing, "You're not good enough to succeed." Over time, this internalized story might lead them to avoid pursuing meaningful career opportunities, believing failure is inevitable. Another scenario could involve someone who repeatedly attracts unhealthy relationships, convinced that love always ends in disappointment because that's the story they believed about themselves. By becoming aware of these narratives, we gain the power to consciously reshape them, transforming limiting stories into empowering ones. The book emphasizes that rewriting your story involves both awareness and intentional action. Reflective questions such as, which stories am I telling myself that limit my potential? How do these stories influence my decisions and behavior? And if I could rewrite this narrative, what would I want it to say? Help uncover patterns that require change. Practical applications include journaling to identify recurring self-limiting narratives, reframing past experiences with empowering interpretations, and practicing daily affirmations that reinforce the story you want to live. For instance, someone who believes they always fail in leadership roles might journal about past successes they overlook, reframe challenges as learning opportunities, and consciously remind themselves of their capability before taking on new responsibilities. Another example could involve someone who sees themselves as unlucky in love. They might reflect on past relationships, extract lessons, and create a new internal story centered around self-worth, healthy boundaries, and the possibility of meaningful connection. Over time, these deliberate actions reshape subconscious beliefs, guiding thoughts, decisions, and behaviors toward growth, fulfillment, and self-mastery. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that the most profound mountains we face are the narratives we accept about ourselves. By rewriting your story, you reclaim agency, break self-sabotaging cycles, and create a life aligned with your values, potential, and aspirations. The process requires honesty, reflection, and consistent effort, but it offers a transformative reward of living as the author of your own life rather than a passive character in someone else's narrative. Main points and narratives we tell ourselves shape beliefs, emotions, and behaviors. Past experiences, trauma, and limiting beliefs often create self-sabotaging stories. Reflective questions to uncover limiting narratives. Which stories am I telling myself that limit my potential? How do these stories influence my decisions and behavior? If I could rewrite this narrative, what would it say? Practical steps to rewrite your story. Journal to identify recurring self-limiting narratives. Reframe past experiences with empowering interpretations. Practice daily affirmations to reinforce the story you want to live. Reflect on past failures as learning opportunities rather than definitive outcomes. Rewriting your story transforms subconscious beliefs and guides behaviors toward growth. Conscious narrative reshaping helps break cycles of self-sabotage and reclaim personal agency. Living intentionally as the author of your own story leads to empowerment, fulfillment, and self-mastery. Creating new habits is one of the most practical and transformative ways to turn self-sabotage into personal growth. Yet many people underestimate the power of small, intentional actions repeated consistently over time. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest explains that habits are the building blocks of our daily lives and ultimately shape our identity, behaviors, and results. For instance, consider someone who struggles with procrastination. Rather than tackling it with sheer willpower alone, which often fails, they can create a habit of working in focused 25-minute intervals each morning, gradually rewiring their brain to embrace productivity. Similarly, someone seeking better mental health might establish a daily gratitude or journaling habit, turning reflection into a consistent practice rather than an occasional effort, leading to long-term emotional resilience. The key is understanding that change is less about dramatic, overnight transformations and more about designing systems that make positive behaviors automatic while reducing friction for action. The chapter emphasizes that creating new habits requires self-awareness, intention, and patience. Reflective questions such as, which habits currently support my growth and which hold me back? What small actions can I implement consistently to replace self-sabotaging patterns? And how can I track progress to stay accountable? Help identify actionable steps. Practical applications include starting with micro-habits, such as committing to 1 push-up a day to build a fitness routine or writing 1 sentence daily to develop a journaling habit. Habit stacking, linking a new habit to an existing one, is another effective strategy. For example, immediately after brushing your teeth in the morning, you could meditate for 1 minute, gradually increasing the duration. Tracking progress through journals, apps, or habit trackers reinforces consistency and allows reflection on what works or needs adjustment. Over time, these small, intentional habits compound, creating momentum, building self-confidence, and reshaping identity in alignment with long-term goals. By consciously designing habits, we can replace automatic, self-sabotaging behaviors with empowering routines that propel us towards success, fulfillment, and emotional well-being. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that lasting transformation is less about motivation and more about deliberate systems and habits. The mountain we face is climbed 1 small, consistent step at a time. By creating new habits intentionally, we reclaim control over our daily actions, rewire our brains for success, and transform potential into reality. The process may be gradual, but the cumulative impact of consistent, purposeful habits is profound, reshaping both life and identity. Main points habits are the foundation of identity, behavior, and long-term results. Change is achieved through consistent, small, intentional actions rather than dramatic efforts. Reflective questions to guide habit creation. Which habits support my growth, and which hold me back? What small actions can I implement to replace self-sabotaging patterns? How can I track progress and stay accountable? Practical steps to create new habits. Start with micro-habits that are easy to maintain. Use habit stacking to link new habits to existing routines. Track progress through journals, apps, or habit trackers. Gradually increase the complexity or duration of new habits over time. Creating intentional habits replaces automatic self-sabotaging behaviors with empowering routines. Small, consistent actions compound over time, building momentum, self-confidence, and alignment with goals. Designing habits consciously enables control, growth, and transformation in both behavior and identity. Developing discipline is the essential bridge between intention and action, turning dreams into tangible results while dismantling self-sabotaging patterns. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest emphasizes that discipline is not about rigid self-punishment or perfection. It is about consistent, conscious effort toward meaningful goals, even when motivation wanes. Consider a student preparing for a professional exam. At first, motivation may fuel their study sessions, but as challenges arise or interest dips, without discipline, procrastination can take over, sabotaging their progress. By cultivating discipline, the student learns to show up daily, breaking the cycle of avoidance and gradually mastering the material, transforming stress and fear into competence and confidence. Similarly, a person trying to improve their fitness may not always feel like exercising, but discipline ensures they complete workouts consistently, turning sporadic effort into long-term transformation. Discipline is what converts intention into results, bridging the gap between what we want and what we actually achieve. The chapter highlights that discipline is cultivated through self-awareness, structured routines, and accountability. Reflective questions such as, which areas of my life require more consistency? Where do I allow excuses to dictate my behavior? And how can I design systems that make discipline easier? Guide personal growth. Practical applications include creating a daily schedule that prioritizes high-impact actions, breaking large tasks into smaller, manageable steps, and using reminders or accountability partners to maintain consistency. For instance, someone aiming to write a book might commit to writing 300 words per day rather than waiting for a burst of inspiration. Another example is a professional learning a new skill. They can practice for 20 minutes daily, ensuring steady progress and avoiding burnout. Over time, these small but disciplined actions compound, building resilience, self-control, and the confidence to face challenges without giving into old habits or fears. Discipline does not eliminate difficulty, but it equips individuals to navigate obstacles with consistency, clarity, and determination, turning potential into sustained achievement. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that discipline is a backbone of personal transformation. Motivation comes and goes, but discipline ensures consistent action and long-term growth. The mountain we face is climbed not by sporadic bursts of energy, but through steady, disciplined steps that build strength, resilience, and mastery over both our habits and our lives. Developing discipline is not just about achieving goals. It is about becoming a person capable of facing challenges with consistency, courage, and conscious choice. Main points: discipline bridges a gap between intention and consistent action, turning goals into results. True discipline is not punishment. It is steady, conscious effort even when motivation fades. Reflective questions to cultivate discipline. Which areas of my life require more consistency? Where do I allow excuses to dictate my behavior? How can I design systems that make discipline easier? Practical steps to develop discipline. Create structured daily routines that prioritize high impact. Actions. Break large tasks into small, manageable steps to reduce resistance. Use reminders, accountability partners, or habit trackers to maintain consistency. Commit to small, daily actions that compound into long-term transformation. Discipline builds resilience, self-control, and confidence in the face of challenges. Consistent, disciplined action over time is more effective than relying solely on motivation. Developing discipline allows us to climb internal mountains and achieve sustained personal growth. Becoming your best self is a culmination of self-awareness, discipline, and intentional growth, where the journey of transformation meets tangible action. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest emphasizes that self-improvement is not about perfection or comparison with others. It is about consistently aligning your actions, habits, and mindset with your highest potential. Imagine someone who has always struggled with self-doubt in their career. By intentionally practicing emotional intelligence, creating empowering habits, and cultivating discipline, they gradually step into roles they once thought were beyond their reach, demonstrating that growth is a process rather than a sudden leap. Similarly, a person aiming to strengthen relationships may reflect on past patterns of conflict and consciously choose empathy, active listening, and vulnerability, transforming both their interactions and self-perception. Becoming your best self is about identifying the areas of life where self-sabotage occurs, whether in career, relationships, or personal well-being, and systematically replacing limiting behaviors with empowering actions. The chapter stresses that this transformation requires reflection, intentionality, and consistent practice. Reflective questions such as, which aspect of myself am I ready to grow? What patterns or behaviors are holding me back? And what specific actions can I take daily to embody my highest potential? Help create a roadmap for personal evolution. Practical applications include setting clear goals, monitoring progress, celebrating small wins, and continually adjusting strategies based on what is most effective. For instance, someone working on health may establish a weekly exercise schedule, balanced nutrition plan, and mindfulness routine, reflecting on what works and adapting as needed. Another example could involve someone aiming to enhance creativity. They might commit to daily writing or sketching exercises, gradually building a habit of expression that nurtures innovation. By consistently aligning actions with values and potential, we cultivate a life that feels purposeful, resilient, and empowered. Becoming your best self is not a destination. It is an ongoing commitment to self-mastery, growth, and conscious living. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that the mountain we face is not conquered in a single step, but through sustained effort, reflection, and transformation. By embracing intentional growth, we overcome self-sabotage, strengthen resilience, and step into a version of ourselves that is capable, empowered, and authentic. Becoming your best self is about reclaiming control, embodying your highest values, and taking consistent, purposeful steps toward living a life that truly reflects your potential. Main points: becoming your best self is about aligning actions, habits, and mindset with your highest potential. Transformation is a process, not a sudden leap, and is driven by self-awareness, discipline, and intentional growth. Reflective questions to guide personal evolution. Which aspect of myself am I ready to grow? What patterns or behaviors are holding me back? What specific actions can I take daily to embody my highest potential? Practical steps to become your best self. Set clear goals and monitor progress consistently. Celebrate small wins to reinforce positive behavior. Replace self-sabotaging behaviors with empowering actions. Reflect and adjust strategies based on what works. Cultivate habits that support emotional intelligence, resilience, and personal growth. Transformation requires consistent effort, reflection, and conscious action. Embodying your best self allows you to overcome self-sabotage, strengthen relationships, and create purpose-driven success. Becoming your best self is an ongoing commitment to growth, self-mastery, and living authentically. Aligning with your purpose is the ultimate step in transforming self-sabotage into meaningful, intentional living. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest emphasizes that discovering and committing to your purpose is not merely about achieving goals. It is about living in alignment with your values, passions, and deepest potential. Many people drift through life reacting to external pressures, societal expectations, or fleeting desires, unknowingly sabotaging their own growth. Imagine an artist who has spent years creating work that pleases others but never expresses their true vision. Despite technical skill, they feel unfulfilled and frustrated because their actions are disconnected from their purpose. By consciously reflecting on what truly matters, embracing authentic passions, and taking deliberate steps toward meaningful work, the artist can align daily actions with their deeper purpose, experiencing both fulfillment and impact. Similarly, a professional may climb the corporate ladder without joy, only to realize that their true calling lies in mentoring others or creating social impact. And by shifting focus toward purpose-driven initiatives, they unlock both motivation and resilience. Aligning with your purpose requires honesty, courage, and self-reflection. It asks you to examine the story you tell yourself about who you are and who you want to become, then take actionable steps to live it. The chapter encourages readers to engage in reflective practices and set intentions that resonate with their authentic selves. Reflective questions such as, what activities or roles make me feel most alive? Which values guide my decisions and bring me satisfaction? And what would I pursue if I were not afraid of failure or judgment? Help clarify purpose. Practical applications include journaling your passions and values, mapping daily actions to long-term meaningful goals, and eliminating commitments that conflict with your purpose. For example, someone feeling stuck in an unfulfilling job might identify a small side project that aligns with their passions, gradually building confidence and direction, while another person might restructure daily routines to dedicate time to activities that cultivate personal growth, learning, and impact. By consciously aligning actions with purpose, you reduce internal conflict, increase motivation, and build a life that feels authentic and empowering. Alignment is not a one-time achievement. It is a continuous process of evaluating choices, reflecting on growth, and adjusting course to stay true to your vision of fulfillment and contribution. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that self-sabotage often arises from misalignment with purpose. By identifying your values, clarifying your passions, and taking intentional steps toward meaningful engagement, you transform obstacles into opportunities and create a life that is both impactful and deeply satisfying. Aligning with your purpose allows you to live intentionally, break destructive cycles, and cultivate resilience, ensuring that every action contributes to becoming the person you are truly meant to be. Main points: aligning with your purpose transforms self-sabotage into intentional, meaningful living. Purpose is about living in alignment with values, passions, and authentic potential. Reflective questions to discover and align with purpose. What activities or roles make me feel most alive? Which values guide my decisions and bring satisfaction? What would I pursue if I were not afraid of failure or judgment? Practical steps to align with your purpose. Journal your passions, values, and authentic goals. Map daily actions to long-term meaningful objectives. Eliminate commitments that conflict with your purpose. Start small with purpose-aligned projects or routines and gradually expand. Continuously reflect and adjust choices to maintain alignment. Alignment increases motivation, reduces internal conflict, and fosters resilience. Living intentionally in alignment with purpose leads to fulfillment, impact, and personal growth. Self-sabotage diminishes as actions, habits, and decisions resonate with your authentic self. Self-mastery and growth represent the pinnacle of personal transformation, where conscious effort, reflection, and intentional action converge to create a life of purpose, resilience, and fulfillment. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest emphasizes that self-mastery is not about controlling every aspect of life perfectly or avoiding mistakes. It is about understanding your own behaviors, emotions, and patterns, then taking deliberate steps to grow beyond limitations. Imagine a person who constantly reacts with frustration in stressful situations, whether at work or in personal relationships. Through self-mastery, they begin to recognize their triggers, pause before responding, and choose actions that align with long-term goals rather than short-term impulses. Over time, this deliberate practice transforms not only their emotional responses but also the quality of their relationships and professional performance. Similarly, a young entrepreneur may face repeated failures in business ventures. Instead of giving up or blaming external circumstances, self-mastery teaches them to analyze mistakes, learn systematically, and adjust strategies, turning setbacks into stepping stones for growth. Growth, therefore, is both the result and the reward of self-mastery. It emerges from consistent self-awareness, intentional habit building, and the courage to face discomfort while challenging limiting beliefs. The chapter highlights that achieving self-mastery requires reflection, structured practice, and accountability. Reflective questions such as, which patterns of thought or behavior hold me back? How can I respond instead of react in challenging situations? And what consistent actions can I take to strengthen my emotional, mental, and behavioral control, guide personal evolution? Practical applications include journaling daily reflections to identify recurring obstacles, creating routines that promote self-discipline, and seeking feedback from mentors or trusted peers to remain accountable. For instance, someone wanting to improve communication skills might practice active listening in every conversation, consciously observing their impulses to interrupt or judge, and gradually cultivating empathy and clarity. Another example is a person aiming to enhance physical and mental resilience. They might implement structured morning routines, regular exercise, meditation, and goal tracking to reinforce self-discipline and focus. By continuously observing, adjusting, and refining their actions, individuals learn to master their impulses, align with their values, and consistently pursue growth, ultimately reshaping both identity and potential. Self-mastery, therefore, is a lifelong commitment to conscious living, where each decision becomes a tool for empowerment and each challenge an opportunity for growth. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that self-mastery is a foundation for sustainable personal growth. By understanding and managing emotions, behaviors, and habits, individuals can navigate life's challenges with clarity, resilience, and intentionality. Growth is not accidental. It is a natural outcome of deliberate self-mastery, allowing individuals to rise above self-sabotage, embrace potential, and create a life that reflects their highest values and capabilities. Main point self-mastery is a conscious understanding and management of emotions, behaviors, and patterns. Growth emerges from deliberate practice, reflection, and consistent effort. Reflective questions to foster self-mastery and growth. Which patterns of thought or behavior hold me back? How can I respond instead of react in challenging situations? What consistent actions can I take to strengthen emotional, mental, and behavioral control? Practical steps to achieve self-mastery journal daily. Reflections to identify obstacles and patterns. Create structured routines that reinforce self-discipline and focus. Seek feedback from mentors or trusted peers for accountability. Practice conscious, intentional actions, such as active listening or controlled responses to triggers. Apply small, consistent actions that compound over time into lasting growth. Self-mastery transforms challenges into opportunities, setbacks into lessons, and potential into realized capabilities. Personal growth is a lifelong commitment to reflection, conscious choice, and intentional action. Mastering oneself empowers individuals to rise above self-sabotage and live authentically aligned with their highest values. Long-term change is a culmination of consistent effort, self-awareness, and disciplined action, transforming fleeting motivation into sustainable growth that reshapes your life. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest emphasizes that true transformation is not about quick fixes, temporary bursts of inspiration, or drastic overhauls. It is about cultivating habits, mindset shifts, and emotional mastery that endure over time. Consider someone trying to lose weight. Starting with a strict diet and intense workouts may yield fast results, but without a focus on consistency, self-reflection, and habit formation, old patterns inevitably return. Long-term change occurs when the individual establishes routines that integrate healthy choices seamlessly into daily life, like meal planning, regular movement, and mindful reflection, making progress a natural part of their lifestyle rather than a forced effort. Similarly, a professional aiming to enhance career growth cannot rely solely on short-term pushes or sporadic bursts of networking. By committing to continuous learning, skill development, and deliberate relationship building, they create a trajectory of advancement that compounds over years. Long-term change is therefore about patience, persistence, and strategic self-awareness, recognizing that each small, consistent step accumulates into significant transformation over time. The chapter emphasizes that sustaining long-term change requires accountability, reflection, and flexibility. Reflective questions such as, Which habits are truly serving my growth? Where do I tend to revert to old patterns? And what incremental steps can I commit to daily or weekly for lasting progress? Help maintain focus and clarity. Practical applications include designing systems that make desirable behaviors automatic, setting realistic milestones, and reviewing progress regularly to adapt strategies as needed. For instance, someone learning a new language may commit to studying 15 minutes daily rather than overwhelming themselves with sporadic, multi-hour sessions. Another example is someone seeking financial stability. They might automate savings, track expenses, and gradually increase investment contributions, building long-term security without relying on short-lived discipline or motivation. By integrating these small, intentional actions into daily routines, individuals solidify behaviors that endure, creating a foundation for sustained growth, self-mastery, and meaningful life transformation. Long-term change is not achieved overnight. It is a result of cumulative, intentional actions that reflect commitment to personal evolution, resilience, and authentic living. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that long-term change is built on consistency, reflection, and intentional systems that support growth. By prioritizing incremental improvements and maintaining self-awareness, we replace self-sabotaging habits with empowering routines, ensuring that transformation lasts and becomes a natural part of who we are. Main points: long-term change is a result of consistent, intentional action, not quick fixes or bursts of motivation. Reflective questions to support lasting transformation. Which habits are truly serving my growth? Where do I tend to revert to old patterns? What incremental steps can I commit to daily or weekly for lasting progress? Practical steps to achieve long-term change. Create systems that make positive behaviors automatic. Break large goals into manageable, sustainable actions. Set realistic milestones and track progress regularly. Review and adapt strategies to stay aligned with long-term objectives. Commit to small, consistent actions that compound over time. Long-term change strengthens resilience, self-mastery, and purposeful living. Incremental, intentional habits gradually replace self-sabotage with empowering behaviors. Sustained transformation is a cumulative process, integrating growth into daily life. True change is achieved when actions, mindset, and habits align consistently with your goals and values. Living without self-sabotage is the ultimate goal of personal transformation, where awareness, intentionality, and consistent action converge to create a life free from destructive patterns. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest emphasizes that self-sabotage is not a character flaw. It is a learned response to fear, discomfort, or unmet needs, but it can be unlearned through conscious effort. Imagine someone who repeatedly procrastinates on projects that could advance their career or personal goals. By identifying the underlying fear of failure, judgment, or even success, they can begin to restructure their mindset and behaviors. Similarly, a person who struggles with unhealthy relationships may notice patterns of self-sabotage, such as avoiding confrontation or seeking validation in ways that harm their well-being. By applying intentional strategies to recognize triggers, manage emotions, and replace harmful behaviors with empowering actions, individuals can gradually shift from reactive patterns to purposeful living. This chapter teaches that freedom from self-sabotage is not about eliminating all challenges or discomfort, but about responding consciously rather than reflexively, creating a life aligned with values, goals, and authentic potential. The chapter encourages practical application through reflection, self-awareness, and actionable habit building. Reflective questions such as, which recurring behaviors consistently hold me back? What fears or beliefs fuel my self-sabotage? And what small, consistent actions can I take to replace these patterns with empowering behaviors? Guide personal evolution. Role-life application might involve creating micro-habits that counter self-sabotaging tendencies. Someone wanting to improve productivity might start with a simple 2-minute rule, committing to beginning a task for just 2 minutes to overcome inertia. Another example is managing emotional triggers. If someone often reacts angrily to criticism, they could pause, breathe, and reflect before responding, gradually rewiring their emotional response. By consciously choosing behaviors that align with long-term goals, individuals replace fear-driven patterns with intentional growth, fostering resilience, confidence, and self-efficacy. Living without self-sabotage also involves self-compassion, acknowledging missteps without judgment and learning from them, creating a sustainable cycle of reflection, adjustment, and growth. Ultimately, This chapter shows that by consistently practicing awareness, emotional regulation, and aligned action, anyone can live a life free from self-sabotage, fully embracing their potential and purpose. Main points: living without self-sabotage is achieved through awareness, intentionality, and consistent action. Self-sabotage is a learned response to fear, discomfort, or unmet needs. It can be unlearned, reflective questions to overcome self-sabotage. Which recurring behaviors consistently hold me back? What fears or beliefs fuel my self-sabotage? What small, consistent actions can I take to replace these patterns with empowering behaviors? Practical strategies to live without self-sabotage. Identify emotional triggers and underlying fears driving harmful behaviors. Replace destructive patterns with empowering microhabits. Apply conscious reflection and deliberate responses to challenges. Practice self-compassion by acknowledging mistakes without judgment and learning from them. Align daily actions with values, long-term goals, and authentic potential. Living without self-sabotage fosters resilience, confidence, emotional regulation, and purposeful growth. Freedom from self-sabotage is a continuous, intentional process of self-mastery and aligned action. Consistent practice of awareness and deliberate behavior ensures transformation into an empowered, fulfilled version of yourself. Becoming the mountain is the ultimate metaphor for mastering your life, transforming obstacles into strength, and turning challenges into opportunity for personal growth. In this chapter, Brianna Wiest emphasizes that true empowerment comes from standing firmly in your own power, embracing discomfort, and becoming resilient in the face of life's inevitable struggles. Imagine a person who has faced repeated career setbacks, relationship challenges, or personal disappointments. Rather than being swept away by fear, frustration, or self-doubt, they learn to anchor themselves in self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and intentional action, becoming steady and unshakable like a mountain. Similarly, consider someone navigating societal pressures or family expectations that constantly test their limits. By cultivating inner strength, setting boundaries, and consistently aligning actions with personal values, they rise above external chaos, transforming challenges into opportunities for growth. This chapter teaches that becoming the mountain is not about rigidity or avoiding vulnerability. It is about integrating lessons from failures, processing emotional pain, and developing the resilience to endure while maintaining clarity, purpose, and self-mastery. Practical application involves adopting habits, mindsets, and strategies that reinforce stability and empowerment. Reflective questions such as, where in my life do I feel most unsteady? Which fears or doubts pull me away from my power? And what daily practices can I adopt to strengthen my inner resilience, guide the journey toward becoming unshakable? Real-life examples include cultivating emotional resilience through journaling or meditation, building mental toughness by gradually facing challenges instead of avoiding them, and setting clear boundaries to protect energy and focus. Another scenario might involve someone striving for personal growth while facing criticism or setbacks. By treating these experiences as lessons rather than threats, they steadily develop confidence, composure, and clarity. The chapter emphasizes that consistent self-reflection, conscious habit formation, and deliberate action transform not only your ability to navigate difficulties but also your sense of self-worth, purpose, and inner stability. Becoming the mountain means embracing the full spectrum of life with strength, balance, and intentionality, creating a foundation from which growth, fulfillment, and mastery naturally arise. Ultimately, this chapter shows that by committing to self-awareness, resilience, and purposeful action, individuals can rise above internal and external challenges, becoming steadfast, empowered, and unshakable, fully aligned with their highest potential. Main points: becoming the mountain is about cultivating inner strength, resilience, and stability in the face of challenges. Reflective questions to guide personal empowerment. Where in my life do I feel most unsteady? Which fears or doubts pull me away from my power? What daily practices can I adopt to strengthen my inner resilience? Practical steps to embody this principle. Practice daily self-reflection to identify vulnerabilities and strengths. Develop emotional resilience through journaling, meditation, or mindful practices. Confront challenges gradually instead of avoiding discomfort to build mental toughness. Set clear boundaries to protect focus, energy, and personal growth. Treat setbacks and criticism as opportunities for learning and empowerment. Becoming the mountain is not rigidity. It is the integration of lessons, emotional processing, and deliberate action, steadiness, clarity, and intentional living arise from consistent self-awareness and empowered decision-making embodying. This principle allows individuals to navigate life's obstacles with composure, confidence, and purpose. True mastery and fulfillment come from transforming challenges into stepping stones, anchored in self-mastery and resilience. In final thoughts on transformation, Brianna Wiest wraps up the journey of personal growth and self-mastery, reminding readers that transformation is not a single moment of change, but a lifelong process of self-awareness, reflection, and deliberate action. She emphasizes that every challenge, setback, and moment of discomfort is an opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, and more aligned with your true self. Imagine someone who has struggled with patterns of self-sabotage, fear of change, or limiting beliefs. Over time, by applying the strategies of awareness, emotional regulation, and conscious habit formation discussed throughout the book, they start to notice subtle shifts. They respond to challenges with calm instead of panic, make decisions based on values rather than fear, and cultivate daily practices that reinforce growth rather than regression. Transformation, Wiest explains, is cumulative. It is built in the small choices we make every day, the reflections we engage in, and the actions we consistently take, even when progress feels slow or imperceptible. Another example is someone seeking healthier relationships. By acknowledging their past patterns, setting boundaries, and consciously choosing partners and interactions that align with their values, they gradually move from reactive behaviors to empowered, intentional living. The chapter highlights that true transformation requires patience, resilience, and compassion for oneself, acknowledging that mistakes are part of the process and that growth is continuous, not linear. Practical application involves integrating all the tools and insight from the book into daily life. Reflective journaling to track patterns, conscious habit creation to replace self-sabotage, emotional awareness to navigate triggers, and purposeful goal setting to align actions with personal values. Reflective questions such as, what small changes can I implement today that compound into long-term transformation? Which areas of my life still resist conscious growth? And how can I show compassion to myself during setbacks while maintaining momentum? Help solidify the process of lasting change. Real-life application might include establishing a morning routine that prioritizes mental clarity, practicing mindful pauses before reacting emotionally, or celebrating small victories that reinforce confidence and self-efficacy. The key takeaway is that transformation is not an endpoint but a practice, a continuous, intentional process that integrates lessons, strengthens resilience, and empowers individuals to live fully aligned with their purpose. By embracing this mindset, anyone can navigate life's obstacles, break free from self-sabotage, and cultivate a life of enduring growth and fulfillment. Main Points transformation is a lifelong, cumulative process built through consistent self-awareness, reflection, and deliberate action. Reflective questions to support ongoing growth. What small changes can I implement today that compound into long-term transformation? Which areas of my life still resist conscious growth? How can I show compassion to myself during setbacks while maintaining momentum? Practical strategies for lasting transformation. Integrate conscious habits into daily routines that reinforce growth. Track patterns of self-sabotage or limiting beliefs and address them intentionally. Cultivate emotional awareness to respond thoughtfully to triggers. Use setbacks as learning opportunities rather than failures. Align daily actions consistently with values, goals, and authentic potential. Transformation requires patience, resilience, and self-compassion. It is not linear but continuous. Small, intentional choices accumulate over time into meaningful, lasting change. True growth is achieved when actions, habits, mindset, and emotional responses align with purpose. Embracing transformation empowers individuals to overcome obstacles, break free from old patterns, and live a life of self-mastery, fulfillment, and aligned purpose. Thank you for listening to The Mountain Is You. To quickly recap, we explored why we self-sabotage, how to recognize our triggers and emotional patterns, the power of creating new habits, building emotional intelligence, and ultimately, how to become the mountain, strong, resilient, and aligned with your true purpose. Remember, transformation is a journey built on awareness, intentional action, and self-compassion. If this video inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a book summary that can transform your life. Share your reflections in the comments. What's one step you'll take today to overcome self-sabotage? And if you want to support the channel, Check out the donation links in the description.